Welcome inside Hoosier Football Tailgate. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and tonight we flipped the script. Last week we broke down the Indiana offensive position by position. Tonight it's all about the defense. And when we start looking at what Bryant Haynes potentially has to work with in 2026, there's one question I keep coming back to. Could this Indiana defense actually be better than last year's national championship defense? Think about it. We are asking Indiana, who just went 16-0, won the national championship with a defense that was fast, physical, and relentless, consistently putting offenses in bad situations. Now you don't lose players like Angelo Pons and Aiden Fisher and simply pretend nothing has changed. Those are big-time football players. But here's what has my attention as we move through week 3 of fall camp. Look at what Indiana still has, and then look at what they have added. We're going to start tonight on the back end with the secondary, Jamari Sharp, Amir Farrell. Those are some 2 experienced guys who've played a lot of football in this defense. Now you add in players like A.J. Harris from Penn State, Preston Zachman from Wisconsin, Gandy, who came in 2 years ago from Pitt, and Bryant Haynes has another secondary with experience and athleticism and versatility. Then you go to the linebacker position. We can talk about that position without even acknowledging the loss of Aiden Fisher, but Indiana isn't just starting over there. You got Hardy and Jones both back at those 2 positions on the inside who've played a lot of football, and I think that's going to be a really interesting combination to watch because those guys are playing behind what I believe could eventually become the strength of this entire football team, and that is the defensive line. Folks, when you start putting the names on the board, it gets interesting in a hurry. Tyreek Tucker, Marino Landino. Then you add guys like Obi Zor and Osansami and Burnham and Hygel added into the rotation. Remember, that's before the defensive front gets completely healthy because at some point, Indiana expects to get Stephen Daly and Kalen Wyatt back into the mix. And I don't necessarily expect those 2 to be ready to play a full workload in week 1. Their progression is what's going to have to be watched during these opening few weeks. But I think about what this defensive line could look like when everybody's available. That's when the question changes. It's no longer, does Indiana have enough D linemen? It might become, how in the world does Bryant Haynes find enough snaps for all of them? And that's a pretty good problem to have. So tonight we're putting the 2026 Indiana defense too deep on the board. We're gonna start with the secondary first, then we'll take a break and look at the linebackers, and then of course finish with the D line. But before we get to that, we've got plenty happening around Indiana football, and we're going to get to that here in a few moments as Indiana continues to think bigger when it comes to the future of Memorial Stadium. We'll talk a little bit about the deciding factor that the Board of Trustees just approved. And then as the season is getting closer, the depth charts start taking shape. And tonight we're going to find out just how good this Indiana defense could be here tonight. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. And of course, you are here with us at Hoosier Football Tailgate. Again, this evening, if you would like to participate, have questions that you would like to have answered, by all means, put those in the chat box and we'll get to them as soon as possible. Also, if you could do me a big favor, hit that subscribe button and like button on YouTube on both channels, the Hoosier Football Tailgate, and of course, the Hoosier on 3. Both of those would greatly appreciate that like button hit and the subscribe button hit. And then don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you get notified when we are going live. And we will be changing shortly and be coming with you at you with 2 tailgates a week once we get to game week, which is not too far off. We're talking about like 15 days in some respects to the first game. So it is right around the corner. And David, appreciate you being here this evening. Appreciate you all coming by to take a quick listen to tonight's show, as well as potentially get ready for Fernando Mendoza's Houston game where he'll play the Texans and Aiden Fisher. So we'll have two eyes on this for now, and then of course we'll sneak a peek here and there if we're able to. But again, I think this is the big thing about this game that's coming up for Fernando, it being week number 2 for him. And we'll see where he gets to with all this stuff against Aiden Fisher, and see if Fernando gets a actual, I guess you could say, improve in his mindset from where he was week 1 last week. I thought he played pretty good. Fernando didn't think that he played all that great, but again, young pup trying to get his feet established in Las Vegas, and I'm sure he did quite well according to the coaching staff. But let's look at tonight's discussionary aspect stuff with Coach Griff's 5 things that matter. And first one off the top is the AP Preseason Top 25 poll was released, of course. And as you know, that Indiana was voted there at number 6. And again, we could spend all night debating whether that is correct or incorrect. It means absolutely nothing. Like we said last year, we could take this poll and throw it away. The bigger poll that starts making more sense is when you get to about week 4 in this equation. But you got Ohio State and Oregon 1-2. That's like the first time in 60 some odd years that has happened. 2 Big Ten teams occupying the 1 and 2 position in a preseason poll. And then, of course, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, and then Indiana falls there at number 6. Other Big Ten teams on there, of course, are Michigan, Washington, as well as Penn State and Iowa. So the Big Ten is, and I forgot USC, the Big Ten is adequately represented in the top 25. And like I said, I do believe Penn State is a team you got to keep an eye on. They could be a team like Indiana was a year ago. New coaching staff, brought a lot of players in from Iowa State, and favorable schedule for the Penn State Nittany Lions this year under first-year head coach Matt Campbell. But they are ones to definitely, keep a watch of because of how their schedule sets up for them in some respects. So again, Indiana comes in there at number 6 in the AP poll. Another article that was put out this past week, it was called The Cost of a Championship Roster. And of course, things are changing by the minute when you think of economics of college football. You got rev share, NIL, of course, the transfer portal and what all that brings, player retention. I mean, it's a ever-changing world when it comes to the economic aspects of things. And last year, there was rumors that Indiana was spending in upwards of $50 million, and the reality of it was they were probably somewhere around around $30 million, maybe even a little bit lower than that. Right now, it's been reported that schools like LSU, even Ohio State, are right in the $40 million mark on their total rosters, and not a bit surprised by that. And others are doing the same. I do think Notre Dame has even started to open the pocketbooks up in South Bend for Coach Freeman. But I really look at it as how much production are you getting per dollar spent? And I think last year you could say Indiana got a lot of production per dollar spent from the team that they had. But, Indiana, I think Coach Signetti said, I think in this respect, that this year's roster was going to be closer to about 32 million, maybe. And a lot of that was the rising cost of first-year players, high school players, because with only having one portal opening, now you've got to be totally right on your portal gets. And then the high school players are going to be judged in their value by the stars behind their names, right, wrong, or indifferent. And that's where some of the cost factors are being found in the high school recruiting, is based upon what a kid's star rating is. So again, It's the cost of doing business, and you're going to see every way and every shape, form how the Indiana athletic department will go about doing their things as it pertains to revenue generation and line, streams of revenue. We talked about the patches on the shirts that's coming down the road, guarantee it. Different type of naming rights. Notre Dame, they just had a guy name the tunnel and the writers' work area there in South Bend at the stadium there for about $30 million. So you can see that you got to find those lines of revenue streams that you can tap into to help with the other things that are coming into the program, and not rely on just NIL or the rev share aspect of things. So again, it's a costly operation. And like I said, it's the cost of doing business. And, but you got to do it smart. You got to be wise with what you do and how you spend it. And I don't think there's anybody better than that right now than what Coach Cignetti put together his first 2 years in Bloomington. And I do think it's been pretty remarkable of the production that he's gotten from guys and for the dollars that he has spent. And that really helped get Mark Cuban involved in the program more so, because he understood that Cignetti wasn't just throwing dollars at guys and chasing them, but seeing how guys fit within the structure of their roster. And that was the important aspect of it, because, Indiana's not going to be able to afford all the 5 stars out there. There's just no possible way. And they'll have their opportunity to get some of them, but it's just not feasible that they're going to have a high school class that's all 5 stars and be able to pay them in that regard. And I really doubt the Ohio States of the world will be able to either, but we'll have to wait and see on all that. But the championship roster, of course, that was the other one that is in the, I guess you could say, in the news. And of course, the recent ruling in Louisiana's court that now has given some players of the 22 class that are in the NFL camps at this moment the opportunity to come back and play in college for one more year. And for some of them, it may be a better avenue for them in terms of what they may get paid versus what they may make in the NFL. And therefore, it kind of throws a different problem into the world of college football. But I don't necessarily think that Indiana will be in the market, but you never know. And who's out there, who's going to be available, and things of that nature. But again, that goes back to putting a roster together and money and everything else. We also had the USA Today's preseason poll that was put out here earlier. And the big one there is that they had 4 first-teamers. They had Carter Smith, Tyreek Tucker, Elijah Hardy were all first-teamers. And then Nick Marsh was there as a second-team selection. So 4 Indiana Hoosiers, a part of the USA Today's 4 All-American list that was put out earlier this week. And Indiana, again, well represented in that regard with who they had there. It was interesting that you had Nick Marsh become the guy put in the All-American poll and not Charlie Becker. So, again, it's, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I guess you could say. Tim, appreciate you coming and joining us tonight as well. And like I said, if you have any questions along the way, by all means, put it into the chat. We love to answer those if you have any, but we'll keep rolling here as we get going tonight. The other thing is kind of we're now entering that week 3. of the fall camp and, kind of what has been learned over the last 2 weeks with a big scrimmage that had happened this past weekend. I know that it's been talked about the scrimmage that Nick Marsh had was very good, which was a good sign to see. There was no major injuries, which is another good sign. The other thing that I heard was that Josh Hoover is becoming more and more comfortable within the offense, and he had a couple great throws in that scrimmage as well. And of course, the running back and O-line did quite well against a very stout defense, who I guess you could say, according to Sig, seems to be still a little bit ahead of the offense. But as he said, is that it's been a pretty good battle up to this point in camp between both sides of the ball, which is also good to see, because that is going to make each side of the ball that much better, because you're going up against stiff competition and it's just not a one-sided affair in that regard. So huge aspect there when you think about it. Then when you come back to it, and we talked about this probably right before we got into this segment, this Memorial Stadium and the $150 million vote by the Board of Trustees, with $50 million of that being readily available to start enhancing of Memorial Stadium. Now, the other part of that $100 million probably will be something that will be decided later what the purpose of that will be. And when you think about what that may entail, they will probably go to the state to see what type of money they can get from the state, being that they're a state school, to help facilitate that development of Memorial Stadium. That will be a kind of to be determined amount of money. But what I like about it, they're doing something every year. The Board of Trustees recognizes that they need to get some things accomplished. And I don't think there's any question that the press box needs to be addressed. Private suites need to be added, and other areas of revenue that they could generate by it. And hopefully they'll have something on the books and be ready to start working on that as they start going through the 2026 season, so they can get after it pretty quickly within the next year or so. So again, another good sign that everything's moving in the right direction in that respect, so that Indiana is staying the course and talking about doing some of the same things that they've been talking about for many years with the stadium. And they finally got to the point now where they're starting to do them. Of course, winning helps a lot of that, as we know. And, but they've needed it for quite some time when it comes to the overall aesthetics of the stadium from the outside looking in, and vice versa. There are definitely glaring spots that need to be addressed, and addressed now, and no more than the press box, as we all understand from that perspective. As far as adding seats, how that will be done, when that will be done, that will too be something that will probably be a part of that larger sum of money. The $50 million, the way I'm understanding it, is that some of that's going to be utilized for deferred maintenance and stuff. So we'll just have to see what happens there. Hoosier Boomer, glad that you're here with us this evening, as appears that through practice sessions will be completely closed after tomorrow. All info will be delivered by staff. Boy, I don't think so, Hoosier. Sig is from the Nick Saban world of who speaks to the media, and he believes in one voice speaking for the coaching staff, including the coordinators. Now, that doesn't mean they won't do some interviews, perhaps after games or whatever the case may be, but 95% of the time, it's going to be Sig at the mic and nobody else. And like I said, that's kind of what Coach Saban would do when he was in charge, and I'm certain that that's way SIG has been as it pertains to letting whether the coordinators speak or in some cases certain players. I know that Josh Hoover was just allowed to speak to the Big Ten News Network, and that to me was his first opportunity this start of the season that he's had an opportunity to speak to the media, but he's still not been made available for local media. So again, that's all SIG's prerogative and all that. He has a rhyme and a reason for it, and it is what it is when it comes to that. But no, I don't think that will happen. But as it pertains to practice and stuff, yeah, they're starting to hone in this next few weeks on their, too deep. There will be another scrimmage that will be done, and I'm not sure if that's has already happened or it's supposed to happen this weekend. But there'll be one more of those at some point, which will help solidify the roster depth. And then they start focusing on North Texas. And we know how SIG is. He'd rather get to that mentality as opposed to doing any more practice sessions. I mean, he's one of those guys that, when he thinks there's been enough put in and the kids understand what they're doing and the expectations are clearly defined and being achieved, he wants to progress forward and get into working game week. So that's just SIG and what he likes to do in terms of how he handles practice. I mean, he doesn't like being in full pads very much. Shells is probably his preferred method of practice, but we'll see what occurs over the next few days in that respect. So let's start in tonight. We'll start with the secondary for this Indiana defense. And again, they did lose D'Angelo Pons from last year. And look, he was a phenomenal player, made a lot of plays, but you now have to find somebody else to come in and be that guy to be behind or to take the lead on who's going to replace him. And right now, it looks apparently that A.J. Harris from Penn State is right there, but so is Gandy, even though I've got him over at the left quarterback position. And Carson Williams is a young name that we should keep abreast of. He's the transfer from Montana State, played as a true freshman out there, very good corner. And that's somebody that hasn't been talked about a lot, but that doesn't mean he hasn't shown some signs of being pretty good. And then looking at that first group, Byron Baldwin Jr. in there at the quote unquote, the nickel star position. We know what a player he can be. He has shown signs of being a tremendous player. If according to SIG, it's more about consistency than it is anything with him from a day to day. And again, that in itself should come along quite a bit. They've been very impressed by Zachman, the transfer from Wisconsin. Remember, he was hurt early in the season last year that took him out for the remainder of the season. He did not play against Indiana, but he's an experienced kid. But they said that his leadership abilities and him and Farrell have worked great together. And that is an encouraging sign that he's came in and fit right into the scheme of things here at Indiana. But again, in that second group, I do think you've got some good ball players in there with Stewart and Reese. And then, of course, Jalen Bell and Rylan Gandy, who I do think will probably play some, whether they move him back over to the right cornerback position. And him and Harris have been the two that really have been battling for playing time or that starting position at this point in time. But as you can see there, in its experienced group, AJ Harris, what does he bring from Penn State? He's 6'1". He's a big, tall kid, and there's a lot of length with him, just like there is with Zachman too, who's 6'3", and then Byron Baldwin Jr. 6'2", and then Farrell's 6'2". So you got these, guys that are big, lengthy guys, and Gandy's is around 6 foot. And that's, more so becoming the rule of thumb with cornerbacks. The days that D'Angelo Ponzes of the world playing corner are becoming slim. And not that that's anything that's right, but they want tall, lanky bodies there because they're going up against the taller receiver in today's game. But experienced playmakers, I think you got them at, first or second team. I do think it's a solid 2 deep again. Of course, replacing D'Angelo again, that time will tell at that, but it's very versatile in what they can and can't do. It gives Indiana different types of alignment that they can employ. They could play a 4-2-5 defense because Byron Baldwin gives them that extra guy in that setup if they want to. So there's a lot of things that they can get to under Coach Haynes' system. And you've got essentially 6 juniors and 5 sophomores out there on the field right now. And again, there's a lot of those juniors that have a lot of playing time and a lot of experience. So, which I like immensely from that group. Will the Hoosiers have any representation of high school games to review recruit performances? I'll be interested to see if sales can. Yeah, they'll probably have some guys making appearances when they can. Usually that will start sometime after the first of the season. Is usually when that starts occurring, sometime mid to late September, October, because they'll want to get out and watch the 28 class guys, 29 class, and start looking at their next recruiting year in advance with everything. So yeah, I do think that is a definite possibility. But again, for this secondary, the nickel situation is not about putting in a third cornerback. It has always been an pretty important piece in terms of what Coach Haynes would really like to run at times. And it gives them different ways to put pressures. It adds another quote unquote, like a backer into the mix and the structure of the coverages and stuff. And that's where Baldwin fits the best. And I think that is where that kid can shine. Now, can he get to the point where he's consistent and not doing things that are costly to this team? He better find out quick or he's not going to play. I mean, it's going to be that because there's going to be guys that are going to push him. But again, I like their projected group out there as far as the depth is concerned. And, I do think Farrell is another kid that came on last year, had a great year. I think he'll have another one this year, made the big plays. Zachman, what does he bring to the table? And I've said, the leadership, I think he's a hard-nosed kid. And I think he's going to be another guy that can get guys aligned correctly. And, is there enough depth there? And I think the answer to that question is definitely yes. I think they have experience. I think they have athleticism, versatility, and they have multiple players that can play. So I do think that, and I do think Indiana will utilize what they have there at those positions for sure when it comes time for those guys to play, that they'll be able to rotate guys in there when they see fit. But ultimately, the guys that are out there in your first group, you got to be pretty happy with what's presented there on paper. Of course, that doesn't win you ball games. It's how they play that wins you ball games. So, hey, we're going to step aside, take a break. Don't go anywhere. We come back. We got to talk about the linebackers and D-line. So get you something to drink. Come on back here in a few minutes, and we'll get the other part of this defensive depth chart evaluated tonight here on Hoosier Tailgate. Back with more right after these messages.
If you're serious about following Indiana athletics, there has never been a better time to become a premium member of thehoosier.com. Right now, new members can save 75% off their first year, paying just $2.49 per month. That's only $30 for an entire year of premium coverage. Your membership gives you unlimited access to the Hoosier.com, powered by the industry's best team at On3, along with the Rivals Recruiting Network and a subscription to The Athletic, giving you unmatched coverage of Indiana athletics and college sports. As a premium member, you'll receive breaking Indiana football and basketball news, in-depth analysis, elite recruiting coverage, transfer portal updates, exclusive insider information, access to one of the nation's best message board communities, a complete player database, and the exclusive On3 app that puts all of the Hoosiers' content, alerts, and discussions right at your fingertips. Whether you're following Kurt Signetti in Indiana football, Indiana basketball, recruiting, NIL, or the transfer portal, the Hoosier is your home for the most complete Indiana coverage available. But don't wait. This special offer expires Tuesday, August 12th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Join today for just $2.49 per month. Lock in a full year of premium coverage for only $30 and become part of Indiana's premier fan community at thehoosier.com.
Indiana football fans, get your officially licensed Indiana gear today at the Hoosier Tailgate Fanatics storefront. Jerseys, hoodies, hats, collectibles, tailgate gear, and championship apparel, all in one place. Look for the link in the description to the Hoosier Tailgate storefront and gear up today.
Welcome back here to the Hoosier Tailgate. Tonight we are looking at the defensive side of the ball, going through the depth chart and the depth at these positions. Just got done talking about the Hoosier secondary. And again, a very good group that they have assembled there. It was a strong group for them last year, and I continue to think it'll be a strong group for them this year. You know, I just wanted to point out a couple things. The link for that Fanatics store is a part of the YouTube description tonight. So if you get over there for the Game Days Essential site and you would happen to purchase something there, we do receive some form of commission. And usually what I do with that is put it right back into the show and things of that nature and make sure that we're staying ahead of what we need to be doing on a day-to-day basis. But if you would happen to do that, we appreciate it greatly. And of course, the Hoosier.com and that 75% off is still on. So if you can get over there and get a part of that, it's a great deal of for those that love reading about the Indiana Hoosiers, be it football, basketball, whatever. But they've got a lot of great content up there on the Hoosier.com. The other thing is here, hopefully within the next week or so, we will do our roundtable with the guys from the Hoosier.com and talk about where they see this Indiana team as it pertains to the schedule and talk about that like we did last year, predicting where they may think Indiana will finish, so forth and so on. But we'll look for that announcement at a date to be determined here in the future. But it won't be too long from now because we're running up against the start of the season. And like I said earlier tonight, start of game week, we're back into it 2 nights a week with the Hoosier Tailgate. One night will be more of a wrap up of the previous Saturday's game, if there's one. And then, of course, on Thursday is a quote unquote preview of the game on Saturday. So be watching for that as well. Well, let's move to the group now at the linebacker position. That is really a good group as well. There's been, some things that here that, well, they got this wrong. I have this Isaiah's number 1 and Utzinger should be number 2. But again, let's see if that must have been the wrong slide that I took out. So we'll take that off there and I'll just talk about it myself. But anyway, you have Hardy and Jones both returning. Of course, Elijah Hardy last year, he had a great year. First time really being in the mix alongside Aiden Fisher. He did well. And then, of course, Isaiah was kind of spelled both of them at times, and actually started some games when Aiden was unable to go because of an injury. So those two guys are back is huge for Brian Haynes' defense. Isaiah Jones will have the green dot, the one that is assigned to communicate with, have the communication device inside his helmet. And therefore, that will be a big one for him, because that is a very important role, and he does it really good with that aspect of things. David has a question here. Any chance the Wyatt lines up at the linebacker spot? There is a potential there. I think even Coach Signetti has talked about that as being a potential. The other one would be Burnham, the kid from Notre Dame, because he did play standing up last year. So they do have some flexibility within that area to go to those type of bodies when they would jump into that 4-3 defense like they did against Oregon a year ago. So, but anyway, with that one, and then one more question here. D'Angelo was not only great in coverage, he was a superior run defender as well. Yeah, Gandy, they both are going to have to, continue that and then Baldwin is going to have to be a guy that can get out there and play with reckless abandon, and because he has the ability to do that. There's no question about that. But at linebacker, with those two guys, definitely are two really good linebackers. They really can fit the run well. They are well taught in all aspects of linebacker play. That's what made Aiden Fisher so good, that he was very had a great football knowledge, but he was really good at fitting the hole that he was assigned to, or the gap, but then was able to make plays when the ball came to him. And so that's what these guys are going to have to be able to do. And for the most part, they are definitely talented enough to do that. Of course, Jones is a guy that even had a lot of sacks last year, and they used him in different ways. I could expect them to continue that with him. And then, the guys that are behind him, Utzinger and Turner, those guys have been around the system for a couple of years now. They're trusted, especially Turner. He actually played some a year ago. He got banged up in that game, so he didn't come back much after that. But I know that Coach Haynes trusts him, Caden Turner, if needed, him to go out there and play, and Utzinger King as well. And then, of course, you're going to have some other guys that are going to get looks. We talked about the Jacob Savages of the world, and those type of bodies that came in with this freshman class. While they will not be guys that you expect to get to the field, they are depth guys. And these are the type of guys that may be utilized in special team roles and get them experience doing that. And then if there's an opportunity exists or something happens where they have to be counted on, they're ready to go and do that. But right now, the top two groups would be Jones and Hardy, and then Utzinger and Turner behind those two. And then as far as a third backer would be, like they did last year, that's where Wyatt could be a possibility. Also, Burnham, I said, is that type of possibility. But, I wouldn't discount Baldwin either, to be honest with you. So it all depends on how well he comes along. If he can be a dependable option out there, then I don't see them having to do too much there. But again, replacing Aiden, just like having to replace Pons, is always going to be an issue because they were both very productive. And again, I think this would be the side of the ball to a degree, or the position on this side of the ball that may have, for whatever reason, there being a lot of questions about, because losing Aiden and so forth and so on. But to me, with Jones back, Hardy back, I think they're in great hands there. I think those two will be able to, start out and be just as good as they were a year ago. It will be an interesting deal with that. So again, I do think they are okay with that. I see Penn State's worried about Indiana getting NFL players again. Well, Penn State can get them too. And just greedy, winning a title and wanting NFL players. Yeah, hey, can you blame them? I'm sure Matt Campbell's out there looking into the portal right now to see which of those guys from the NFL is coming back too. So glad you're with us there, Penn State Sports Talk. Appreciate you stopping by as always. But again, linebacker crew is in good hands with those two, with Jones and Hardy. And I look for those two guys to be very active in their roles, especially with the defensive line that's in front of them. But again, they provide great leadership. I think they have great tackling production, which means they don't miss too many tackles. They're really good on their fits. I think they're both decent in coverage. And of course, getting to the quarterback. Both of those two, when their number's called to blitz, they come with reckless abandon. And that's what Hardy and Jones do. When they get their number called to go, there's no hesitation. Those dudes go and they go hard, and they have made plays and sacks just because of that. Jones especially. But in all of that aspect of things, Hardy last year, over 100 plus tackle production, ability to rush the passer, athletic. I think he somewhat had a breakout season last year coming into the fray as the guy, and played pretty darn well. And then, of course, Jonesy is just going to have his role increase. But again, he has experience. He's physical. I'd say very similar to Aiden in a lot of ways. And I really think, those two can be a really good duo. But playing linebacker behind this defensive line, if Indiana's defensive front consistently occupies the blockers and keeps Hardy and Jones clean, it's going to make them that much better because they'll be able to read and react better. And of course, with Coach Haynes, they do get some freedom in what they do and how they do it. So, again, with this defensive line that we're going to talk about here in just a second, it is a really good group in that respect from that standpoint. But I do look for both of those guys to be one of the better tandems at linebacker in the Big Ten this year. David, any interest from the kid in the portal from JMU? Not that I have heard. I have not heard anything as it pertains to that. And I know that a lot of schools right now with this recent ruling that this judge in Louisiana handed down, they're being very cautious because of A, how late this was done, and B, whether or not the NCAA is going to have an avenue to appeal this. So they're not going to go out and start doing a lot of things quickly here and jeopardize the fact that they could bring a guy in and only find out that they've ruled him ineligible. So I'm not quite sure this one is going to be as a good as maybe like getting the Daly and Wyatt back, because that was kind of in two different situations there. I don't see how this judge from Louisiana made this ruling, because the kid that played basketball last year for Alabama, who played in the G League, and then he came to Alabama and played a lot of games, but then ultimately was ruled ineligible, and that went through a court system. I'm not sure how the judge in Louisiana can conclude the same thing, that once a kid goes to the NFL and signs a contract, gets drafted or whatever you want to look at it, that they're, so-called amateur status as it pertains to what that is now for the NCAA is no longer eligible to participate in NCAA sanctioned events. So I don't think they'll be overly active in it. It's just my opinion, unless something pops up because of an injury or something. But I think Sig's pretty well happy with what he's got and ready to move forward with that. The group the way it is at this point in time. So, but good question. Definitely something to ponder. And, you know, will those guys get picked up by somebody? Oh, yeah. Somebody will pick them up that needs them. And I think 4 of them are actually played at LSU. And maybe 1 played at Ole Miss under Kiffin. So you can guess what LSU may be doing right now. So we'll see what all happens with that. But let's move into the next group of guys, and that would be the defensive line. When we look at this group, and again, I just threw some things up here right now as it is. With Landino and Tucker, of course, and then the 2 kids from Kansas State, both in there. Obi Izor, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Osunsami. Those 2 guys, Toby Osunsami, both were from Kansas State. Both had productive years last year. Now, one of them, I can't remember which one, did get hurt and miss a big part of the year. So, but both those guys were adequate pickups for what Indiana had lost in Daly and Wyatt, and that's why they went and got these 2 guys. We know what Landino brings to the table and Tucker. They're going to have to continue to produce in those spots because, you know, I do think Daly's a guy that they can sneak to the inside and play inside the box, the inside of, you know, be in a 3 technique or a 1 technique. Or kicking him outside. There's a lot of flexibility there. You got Wyatt, you got Burnham again as an in, and then the kid from Tulsa, who's a big, strong guy. And Sig talked about him, I want to say Monday, about where where he's at to date. And Sig said he's firmly in the 2 deep. And definitely somebody that can help him. And he's a big, strong kid. We watched some film of him a while back when he first came here. And I tell you, the kid's big and strong. And he's a guy that, you know, again, with this the depth of this defensive line, you got, you know, don't forget about Ndukwe either, because that kid can play. And he made some great plays latter part of the year when there was injuries, especially when Daly went down. He became a guy they had to count on. He came in and did great, even in the playoffs. I mean, he had a great game against Oregon that second time around. So they got 10 guys that can play. And this is some crazy depth. That's right, David, at the defensive line. Completely agree with you on that point. It is crazy depth. And I do think that Brian Haynes is will find ways to utilize each and every one of them to their best ability. And I do think this is going to be a rotational thing where you're going to see guys go out and give me your 3 hardest reps, and then we'll get somebody else in there for you. And because they've got the bodies that can do that. So again, it's a good group of defensive linemen. You know, you got Landino, who had a great year last year. Tucker came on as well, getting Daly and Wyatt back. And again, I don't think those 2 will be, counted on in the early part. I look for maybe them 3rd week of the season, maybe, but I don't look for them to be in a position to play in week 1 or week 2, because I think they're going to be very smart with them, especially because they're coming off some pretty serious injuries. But it also gives them a chance to evaluate guys in game-like situations as well, because they know what Daly and Wyatt can do. But you got to use them because they're great ball players, just like other guys on that list are really good ball players. So you find ways to utilize them. Depth is your best friend, especially along the defensive line, because those guys can get banged up real quick. And again, I do think from that standpoint, this group is really going to be a huge, huge plus for this Indiana defense. And by far the best group that Indiana has when it comes to looking at their depth on that side of the ball. There's no question that the defensive line is probably their best position group overall, and I'm including the offense too. I do think that is one key thing, is that the defensive line is their best position group on both sides of the ball. And I do think, like I said, they will find ways to utilize them and be creative in what they do and how they do it. And it's a great problem to have. Let me tell you that in that respects. Let's see here. I'm not quite sure what you meant there, Robert. You may have to help me out there. Let's see here. No sound. Can you guys hear me now? Because I'm not showing it being muted. Yeah, I'm not showing myself being muted. Okay. Thanks, David. Yeah, because I thought there for a second that something happened, and I never saw it say anything about being muted. Well, I hope everybody heard my dissertation on defensive line play. But anyway, I do think they're the best position group that Indiana has. They definitely have, 10 guys that they can rotate in there. And I think they will once they get to Daly and Wyatt being back in the mix. And I do think this is a defensive line that can get pressure on a quarterback, even without having to bring any type of blitzing setup. So that's another great thing, is because you can isolate them one-on-one, and I think they can go win those battles. Of course, Bryant is an aggressive caller, and he wants to present issues to the offensive line to get them off keys. And I don't think he's going to change his philosophical approach, even though he's got 4 bodies in there that can go win one-on-one. But I do think that this group itself is the best group on Indiana's team this year. And I do think as a whole, this defense, I would have to argue, it may be a little bit better than last year's when you look at it front to back and back to front. There's enough guys returning that, produced last year. I know they're losing productivity from Aiden Fisher and productivity from D'Angelo Pons, but at the same time, you got to feel you got to feel that with what Bryant has at his disposal on this defense, that they can be, again, a top tier defense, not only in the Big Ten, but the country. And I do think that will be something that is very possible to see, and you win with defense. And that's what Indiana did last year. They won with their defense. They won with their defense. And I think exactly right. Fresh bodies on demand. There you go, Robert. But, they played such great complementary football last year. Very few times did the offense have to drive the ball 80-plus yards. They got great field position set up from Indiana's defense that led to scoring opportunities. And the defense did a great job of retaining field position. Now, there were some times they gave up some big plays that they shouldn't have and things of that nature. But when you look at it as a whole, they did a phenomenal job last year of setting up an offense that already had a bunch of skill that made it that simpler for them each and every Saturday. And that's got to continue, because that's how you win. You set up your offense for a short field, and you set up your defense to defend a long field. Because when you defend a long field against an offense, chances are it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 75 to 80% you're going to get the ball back because they're very seldom do offenses consistently drive the ball 80 yards or more. Very seldom. Very seldom. Coach, I saw a prediction that IU and ND were ranked in the top 3 defense. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I think Notre Dame is going to have a great defense. I think IU is going to have an outstanding defense. You know, you got to figure that Ohio State's going to rank up in there as well. Not, Michigan will somehow figure in that and then of course Oregon. They're going to have a lot of their defense back from last year. But again, Indiana, I think, is going to have as good a defense, if not a little better than what they had last year. So again, you got to feel good about where Indiana's heading defensively. Well, that's going to wrap it up for our 2-part series of looking at the depth of this Indiana football team. And I do think when you look at it in totality, yes, tight end is a question mark because of youthfulness, but I do think they've got bodies there that they really feel can give them meaningful minutes. And Schott, Gibbs, and Barker, I think was his name, those 3 guys. Offensive line, that was the group that I was the most concerned about. According to Sig, some of these young guys have come along. And Coach Bostad has done a great job in preparation for this. And I feel very confident that whoever he puts out on that field to play, those 5 guys, they're going to get the job done. So I look at this year going into it with a lot of cautious optimism. I think you always have to be cautiously, with that approach. And the reason being is the game of football is a funny game because there's so many little things that can happen that can really derail a team in a game and, so forth and so on. Now, Indiana's been great about not letting that happen, and they will continue to do that, I believe, under Sig. But cautiously optimistic, love the defense, love where the offense is. I think Hoover's becoming a bona fide, big-time QB1, and their backfield and wide receiver room, you got to be excited about. So, let the chips fall where they may, brother. And again, this depth of this Indiana Hoosier team, you can't look at one spot too long and not feel like they've got answers for whatever may or may not happen during the year. And again, just excited where this group is headed. Yep, we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, come by and join us at the Indiana Sports Beat Radio for the Friday show tomorrow, by all means. And always tune into the Hoosier Tailgate each and every Thursday night for now at 7:30. And when we go to 2 times a week, we encourage you to come with us and be with us for 2 times a week. But for now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. You've been watching Hoosier Tailgate here on the Hoosier.com. Good night. Have a great weekend, everybody.